After Martin Luther King's death, the whole country started rioting. Everybody was outraged. You just wouldn't even believe it. Over 100 cities in America started rioting, looting. 35 deaths, 25 injured. This is America.
The world is mine. If I rule the world, imagine that. I free all my sons. I love them, baby. Black diamonds and pearls. Could it be?
Hey YouTube, I'm TyV'aire Benson. Today we're giving you some history facts. If you like history facts and want more, drop down in the comment section and tell us. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Today we'll be educating the youth about the extraordinary Coretta Scott King.
Most Americans only know Coretta Scott King as Martin Luther King's wife. For the most part she was just that. Born the 27th of April 1927, a lot of people in America don't know how important she is. The whole nation knows Martin Luther King life story, but very few actually knows Coretta's.
So, here's some
The assassination of Martin Luther King sparked the greatest wave of social unrest since the Civil War. Riots, demonstrations, window breaking, and the torching of buildings broke out in more than 100 U.S. cities, killing 35 and injuring more than 2,500.
In 1964, Martin Luther King death caused the biggest wave of social arrest since the Civil War, with a death rate of 35 and injuring 2,500 people. After the assassination, the whole country mourned his death. Nobody could believe this happened. Nobody felt the pain like Coretta and her 4 children. Their hearts were broken. She lost her husband. The kids lost their father. She couldn't believe this had actually happened.
Against injustices and indignities experienced on city buses.
Even after all the death threats he had gotten, the President of the United States asked him to lead the civil rights movement. You would think that job came with more protection. You see what's happening today in 2021 with the attack on Capitol. It shows you race is not the only problem anymore. He only wanted peace and equality for everybody. Coretta was not just heartbroken, but devastated. She fought hard to make sure not only this country but the world remembered her husband. She refused to let her husband's legacy die out there, especially after all his contributions to society and doing it leading by example and role model.
My husband had a dream, but he was no dreamer. He moved and he did. He preached nonviolence, but he lived day by day with the real courage that violent men really do not have. That day in Washington, D.C., I believe he expressed not only for the black people of America, but for all free men, the true American dream.
I say to you today, my friend, let freedom reign. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom reign. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom reign from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom reign from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom reign from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom reign from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom reign from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom reign from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom reign, and when this happens, when we allow freedom reign, when we let it reign from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Thousands attended Martin's funeral. Sources say in this picture the president sent a private jet to pick Coretta up and take her to Martin's body. Keep in mind these were the 60s. It was hard for African Americans to travel at this time. A lot of politicians paid their respects attending the funeral, including former First Lady Jackie Kennedy just 5 months after her husband was assassinated too.
I accept the Nobel Prize for Peace at a moment when 22 million Negroes of the United States are engaged in a creative battle.
Days after he was killed, her and the kids along with family and friends all went to the march in Memphis, Tennessee, where thousands came out to support. Coretta once released a statement that year saying, "I was impelled to come." She insisted that the work wasn't done just because Martin was killed. In her Lifetime biopic movie they quote Martin saying, "I know they're going to kill me," all while comforting his wife, and telling her how he couldn't do it without her strength. She knew she was gonna need that strength to keep the fighting going after his death. She wanted to show America how effective peaceful protesting is. She didn't want her husband being washed out of future history books. She knew the work was just beginning, and she wanted the world to remember him not only as a peaceful protester,
Non-violent method,
a great minister,
Light of hope to millions of Negro slaves.
an activist,
said to myself, it isn't worth $60.
and not to mention a role model for the entire black race.
And everything was separate but unequal. I had wonderful parents who inspired me to be the best person that I could be. My mother always told me that I was going to go to college, even if she didn't have but one dress to put on. And so I grew up knowing that I was going to somehow...
Thank God Mrs. Scott had that kind of attitude since Coretta met Martin while attending college in Boston.
After Martin Luther King's assassination, including directly after his funeral service, Coretta took her and the kids to Ebenezer Church in Atlanta every year on January 15th to celebrate and honor her late husband.
Many people don't know or realize he was only 39 at the time of his death. His parents was both still very much alive. In this picture sits left to right his father, Martin Luther King Sr., his mother Alberta King, his widow wife Coretta Scott King, and his only brother A.D. King. He has one sister named Catherine King Harris and she was there as well. Just looking at these three black queens you feel the pain still till this day. His family actually stood by Coretta's side the entire time of his death, but the media didn't report it as much.
A procession of over 100,000 people formed to accompany King's casket as it was borne by 2 mules on a wooden farm wagon down Auburn Avenue to the gravesite at Morehouse College.
Here's some.
A lot of people get the misconception that Martin Luther King and Malcolm was either friends or enemies, and the truth was they were neither. They were 2 black guys who just stood for 2 separate ways against equality. The 2 actually never met or had any type of problems. That all changed when Martin was arrested during a peaceful protest. During that time he had to miss a big press conference among black leaders. Malcolm X went on national television and ripped Martin Luther King to shreds just days before the conference.
The white man pays Reverend Martin Luther King, subsidizes Reverend Martin Luther King, so that Reverend Martin Luther King can continue to teach the Negroes to be defenseless. That's what you mean by nonviolent. Be defenseless. Be defenseless in the face of one of the most cruel beasts that has ever taken the people into captivity. That's this American white man. And they have proved it throughout the country by the police dogs and the police clubs. 100 years ago, they used to put on a white sheet and use a bloodhound against Negroes. Today, they have taken off the white sheet and put on police uniforms. They've traded in the bloodhounds for police dogs, and they're still doing the same thing. And just as
this infuriated Martin and Coretta. Although Martin couldn't make the conference, Coretta could. Martin didn't appreciate the public disrespect and he let him know, firing back respectfully in his own televised interview.
I don't think of love as, in this context, as emotional bosh. I don't think of it as a weak force. But I think of love as something strong and that organizes itself into powerful direct action. Now, this is what I try to teach in the struggle in the South, that we are not engaged in a struggle that means we sit down and do nothing. That there's a great deal of difference between non-resistance to evil and non-violent resistance. Non-resistance leaves you in a state of stagnant passivity and deadening complacency, wherein non-violent resistance means that you do resist in a very strong and determined manner. And I think some of the criticisms of nonviolence, or some of the critics, fail to realize that we are talking about something very strong, and they confuse non-resistance with
You see a lot of this play out in movies like Selma or Betty and Coretta. Coretta decides to go to the conference in place of her husband. When her and Malcolm crossed paths at the conference, he tried to say sorry and pay his respect to the kings, which Coretta tried to reject, but he explained his values and the two came to an understanding. Coretta eventually accepts the apology. Sadly, Malcolm was murdered weeks later, so him and Martin was never able to officially meet. More details on this story coming in our future episodes on him and his wife's story. Did you know this history fact already? Was it new to you? Interestingly, we want to know. Tell us about it in the comments. Now back to the show. After Martin's death, Coretta started a foundation to help relatable women and a petition to keep her late husband's name alive.
The people of America decided they'll protest. Coretta wanted it to be an annual year thing, where every year on January 15th anybody that wanted to help could march peacefully with her in Atlanta, to force the government to make Martin Luther King Jr. Day a national holiday. Coretta was ready. She went every year getting people to sign her petition. Remind you, this is in 1965, the year after he was killed. Similar like Breonna Taylor, Sandra Bland, Mike Brown, etc., but instead this lasted over a decade. Each year it got bigger and bigger, more and more people of all colors came out to support. This lasted over 2 decades after Martin Luther King's death. Coretta didn't give up there. She kept going, and finally her hard work paid off. Remember that little petition we mentioned earlier in the video? Well, that little petition had gained over 6 million signatures. The crowds at her annual celebration grew larger and larger. Eventually, American people who probably couldn't afford to travel to Atlanta started celebrating in their local communities. College students start boycotting the colleges. The outcry worked. Congress gave in. Sources says Congress finally gave in to avoid another civil war. And after all, the president did ask and hire Martin to lead the civil rights movement, which he did amazingly. So they finally approved his holiday. In 1983, President Ronald Reagan finally signed the bill. The holiday wouldn't become a federal holiday until January 15, 1986. Not all 50 states accepted the federal holiday. States like Alabama and Mississippi refused, while states like Massachusetts and Illinois was some of the first to participate in the holiday. But it wouldn't be until January 15, 2000 when all 50 states would finally celebrate the holiday, and we can thank Mrs. King for that. She knew her husband went above and beyond for this country. She knew she couldn't let his legacy die out there. Crazy how a lot of politics that happened over 50 years ago are so similar to today's current events.
Here's some.
Did you know? The United States only have 10 federal holidays. New Year's, Washington Birthday, Memorial Day, Independence Day better known as the 4th of July, Labor Day, Columbus Day, Veterans Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Martin Luther King Day. This makes him not only the first African American to receive this kind of honor, but he's the first U.S. citizen ever to receive this kind of honor. Outside of Martin, George Washington, for the young ones or the ones who just don't know, that was the United States' first president. better known as one of the founding fathers of America. He is the only person that ever had a federal holiday. That's until Coretta fought for Martin's. In the end, Martin Luther King Day wasn't easily accomplished. We at History Facts believe Martin Luther King Day should be celebrated every year, and we have some ideas for you if you don't have any. 1. You could write your own dream speech and share it with family and friends. Or 2. Think of ways to help the country as a whole and not just one race, like Mr. King did. His wife fought 32 years to make it a federal holiday. She kept the fight going and started her own foundation helping women. She put her own life on the line, standing on trial against Congress to make it all happen. It even helped other laws get created. So Mrs. Coretta Scott King, we appreciate you for your views on equality for all and dedication to your husband. 50/21 years later, and your legacy still stands strong. Not just your husband's, but yours too. From standing up for equal rights to founding the King Center of Nonviolent Social Change, our words couldn't express our gratitude.
Not to mention, Miss Coretta Scott King did all this with the whole world watching, a true black queen. We thank you so much. Make sure you keep the conversation going in the comments. I am TyV'aire Benson, and for more history facts, make sure you stay tuned.